Hey, it's Joey ZANABONI, voice of St. Louis City SC. City leads you into the City Boys podcast right now.
Kings, queens, and in-betweens, welcome back to another episode of the City Boys podcast. We have an amazing episode coming your way. As always, I'm Jacob, and I'm joined by two of my best friends, Ethan and Grayson. How are you doing, fellas?
It's another night in paradise, gentlemen. I cannot wait for this episode. Grayson, how are you doing?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling a little nervous. I'm a little shy, but I'm very excited for this episode for one very specific reason.
We have a very special guest with us. As you guys can see, he is an STL native. He is the most electric voice in sports radio. He's a maestro on the mic. When he speaks, he blesses the airwaves. Kings and queens, put your hands together for Joey ZANABONI.
Let's go.
Oh, hey, quite an intro there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast. We're super excited to have you on and really pick your brain about all things city. First, I do want to ask you, because this is the day after the Sporting Kansas City match, how are you feeling after last night?
Yeah, I feel great. I've been really excited by what this team's been able to do. I think now we've won maybe 5 of our last 10. I think unbeaten in 8 of 10 coming into last night. So I think 9 of the last 11 since Toy Shirt got on the field on July 20th. And to see him out there last night was, I mean, what a revelation he's been. A goal and 2 assists. He was all over the place. And I mean, Cello's been fantastic. MLS Match Day team 3 times already. I think he's already leading the team in assists with 5 as well. Fantastic evening all the way around. Really happy for Ross Moose and really happy for Edward as well. And just seeing, I mean, both of them have had to battle through so much adversity this season in their own ways. And to see them get some rewards last night in front of a great crowd. I mean, I really do think it was just as it was twice in the regular season last year against KC. I mean, it was just a big party and some great performances.
Yep, yep. It's definitely good to see the boys smiling again, just having fun.
Good.
It's a beautiful thing. I do have a question about last night. So your call for Leuven's goal, the final goal of the night, gave me the chills.
Hey.
Still gives me the chills every time I watch it. But the chills are the ultimate litmus test for beauty and quality of a moment. Can you remember a moment in your career or in a game that you were calling that gave you the chills and left you in awe? This could be on and off the field.
Wow, yeah, good question. Very poetic way to start this as well. Kudos to you guys for bringing that to this. And yeah, I always go back to an experience I actually had in Missouri. I was working for a team in Texas. It was summer of 2016, and it was an independent professional baseball team. And the guy that was pitching, Derek Callahan, he was supposed to go 2 innings in the preseason game, and he had 2 strikes and 2 outs, and he threw a fastball, and the guy hit it back up the middle, 108 miles per hour, and it smashed him in the face. And he went down on the turf. There was nobody in the stadium. There was no video stream. We were doing an internet radio stream. I mean, we were basically doing it through our website,
Hmm.
and one of the cool things about our program was you could see how many people were listening, and you could also see usernames of people who were listening. And so I had identified pretty early on before the game that his family was listening. They had a username named Callahan, and yeah, when that ball hit his face, I mean, there were multiple people in the dugout that thought it was basically the end of his life, and it was that serious. He passed out, blacked out on the turf for about 30 minutes. And, just the weight and the responsibility of, basically communicating that onto his family was, wow, it was a huge, huge responsibility. And thank God he was able to get up on his own 2 feet and get off the field. And he had a couple of surgeries done. He had a plate put in his face, and a few months went by, and we were way, way out of the division race. We were probably the worst team or the second worst team in the league. And he came back. It was late July. He got on a bus in the Dallas area. We rode up to Joplin, and he came out of the bullpen and set down 10 in a row. He struck out, I think, 5. And I had him on the pregame show that night, and he just said, my mom really appreciated the announcing that night. and I teared up. It was a very emotional thing, and then watching him come out of the bullpen in a game that was between a couple of last place teams. It was virtually meaningless from a results standpoint. But just the courage and the determination that he showed, it still gives me chills. And it led me to, I think, some personal growth as well, because I think what happened after that was I basically said I'll never look again at how many people are listening to one broadcast. And I think before that game, I had seen it was something, it was like 40 some odd people were listening. And listen, on a lot of nights, 40, it would be amazing. And at that
Mm.
time, I had a bit of a different attitude, and you feel like, oh, I wish there was more or whatever. But I realized through
Sure.
that experience that it's not how many people are listening. It really is the individual impact you can have on one listener or one family listening
Well,
across the country. And yeah, that's something that definitely still brings back chills, and
Yeah.
still brings back some pretty heavy emotions for me.
Yeah, it's definitely moments like that in sport where it's more of that the human storyline that really gives sports meaning. And yeah, it's definitely a great story to really visualize that.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of moments with City as well that have given me chills. I think with Edward and everything he's been through, to see him score a goal like that, it really was a special moment for him and for a lot of people who have shown
Mm.
him so much support this season at City Park. It was very cool.
Definitely, definitely.
well, yeah, that is extremely profound, Joey. And sports do provide for so many great moments like that. And I've seen that you've done a lot of work in the community with St. Louis City, including like commentating some of the futsal games. That looks like so much fun. This is much more of a lighthearted question, but out in the community, Joey, you've done plenty with the club. You got to sit in the big Schnucks cart, Joey.
Huh,
Tell us about that. How was that
yeah.
experience? I think that is something that a lot of St. Louisans are fairly envious of.
Well, yeah, it was the honor of a lifetime. I wish I'd been able to drive it. I couldn't afford the parking though. It was too much. It was amazing. I had to buy like 8 spaces to get that thing in. So stayed stationary, but the cool thing about the shopping cart, there's no ladder. The cart really is the ladder. They have a couple little foothold things on it, but you get the opportunity to actually physically scale up and climb and basically do a chin up, bar after bar, and pull yourself up. So yeah, that was really cool. I've seen that many times. I mean, they brought it around in parades, and you just see it. I think maybe we had it at the stadium last year, and yeah, just like every other person that grows up in St. Louis, you kind of wonder what it would be like to sit in the top of the Schnucks shopping cart. And yeah, I was surprised. I was kind of shocked that I ended up getting that opportunity, but thanks to City. I mean, thanks to all the stuff that they do with the community, and it just opens up opportunities for folks like me to live out our dreams as well.
Yeah, you definitely fulfilled a little childhood fantasy of literally scaling up the side of that cart. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I was scared. I'm not gonna lie to you. I
Oh
was.
yeah.
I have sort of a heights,
Oh,
but
me
I think
too.
that's good. I think you always should kind of
The
challenge
healthy,
yourself to
healthy
face those
fear.
fears. Yeah, yeah. So it was good to do that. And I'm big about doing that actually before broadcasts, where I think if you can do something early in the day to either challenge yourself or kind of face a fear before you do the broadcast, it helps to keep the broadcast in a better perspective.
Hmm.
I
I like
might
that.
be taking that piece of advice into our future with this podcast. My question for you to get things going is what has been your favorite moment as a City SC fan, either on the call or just as a spectator?
Yeah, wow. Boy, there's so many of them, and I don't know if I could just narrow it down to one, but there's been some special moments. Obviously, the first season and the first
Mhm.
game, and Klaus scoring the goal like that, and just seeing so many things come together and coming back and having a chance to be right there at the first game at the stadium at City Park and going on that run. I don't know that I have one specific one that again I can narrow it down to, but for me it's really just getting the job and just getting the opportunity. I still remember uh, kind of being able to say I was going forward with the job, right before the first season, and just thinking about what that's meant to me, it makes all the difference. I did minor league baseball and I was doing all this a million different things, and I most of it was out of town. I was doing the ambush here, and I had some stuff, going in St. Louis, but I'm from St. Louis and all my family lives in St. Louis. So really just being able to come back and see people grow up, see nieces and nephews and reconnect with old friends and things like that. That really is the joy in many ways of the job for me. And that's why I'm just thrilled. Even almost at the end of the second year, it still feels very new. It just is always something that I appreciate having that opportunity.
Wow. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. As somebody who grew up in St. Louis, we all played soccer together. And my favorite moment was that Tim Parker goal on the very first game. I was
Yeah.
living in this smaller house. I'm up in Portland, Oregon, if you didn't know. But I was in this smaller house, and there was this like one old closet room that really was the only space to put my computer and monitor,
Mhm.
and didn't have a TV yet at the time, but I could afford Apple TV in order to watch the MLS game. And I'm sitting in this tiny little closet with the door closed, and my dog is sitting on this small chair next to me. And Tim Parker banged that header in, and I was losing my mind in a 4x4 box, basically.
Yeah, as I said a little bit earlier this season, I prayed, if the first goal comes on a set piece, Lord, let me be able to distinguish the person that got it, which is tough. And, there's Ron Weasley right there coming
Yeah.
through. And I mean, yeah, he was such a presence, and it's just the intensity that he brought. I think about his face and obviously the celebration after that, and obviously the birth of his son, or I guess the future birth of his son at that point. And then later in that season, I think we were in Orlando. I think it was late August, and he was not with the team because his wife was in labor. And we got a text probably 2 or 3 hours before the game, and it said, "Hey, it's all good, and Rory Parker has been born." And it kind of brought the whole thing full circle, and just to have that be kind of a piece of the timeline for the first year. Yeah, it encapsulated so much of what the club is about, and the importance of family, and the importance of community, and celebrating with the community. And I just think that was really perfect.
Yeah, it's definitely always a good thing to highlight that the club is a family and it cares about its players and treats them like they are members of a big overarching family that is St. Louis City. I did have a question about your past work. So you've called for many, many different sports over the years. At the University of Florida, you're the broadcaster for men's and women's basketball. Some connections to volleyball while you were there too. Spent some time working for the Air Hogs in Double A and in the minor league with Fredericksburg's Nationals. Even added softball to your repertoire at Coahoma Community. But through it all, it's been no secret that you are a massive fan of baseball. Although you definitely made your mark in the MLS in St. Louis, is MLB still the lifelong dream for you?
Yeah, great question. And it's just funny. I had my high school reunion on Friday, and just kind of
Oh,
running into
wow.
some people, and kind of I've heard that question a couple of times actually over the last few days. So, I did 8 years of baseball. I was doing about 125 games a year between college and
Wow.
professional baseball,
It was a
independent
lot.
baseball. Yeah, and some affiliate of minor league baseball as well. And yeah, it was just the track that I was on. It was so much I mean, so many games, 6 months out of the year. And then I probably about 2017, I really started to do soccer. That was at the University of West Florida, same place I was doing baseball. And I just kind of did some college stuff. I briefly moved to San Antonio. I was working for another college. I came back up here and started doing the ambush. And now I just think with soccer and just how much fun it is with City and with the ambush and with some other stuff. I mean, you really do get the taste for it, and it's high flying and it's fun. And with baseball, I mean, there's so many moments and there's so much that can happen. I've got a lot of knowledge in the game. I had, I would probably say one of the strangers sort of low level professional baseball announcing careers, to this point that you can have. I was in Dubai, I guess, last
Yeah,
winter for
yeah,
the
yeah.
first Middle Eastern Baseball League. And I mean, I've got like a million crazy experiences. With baseball, I love it. I think the game is pure. I do. I don't think there's anything wrong with the game. I think the culture, for better or for worse, I think is probably a little bit out of step now with where America is. And take that however you want. I'm not going to say good or bad, but I think one of the things maybe that's not the game's fault or baseball's fault is just that, yeah, people's attention spans are not what they were. That's not headline news. They certainly aren't what they were 25 years ago, even.
Mm.
And I do think that the game itself, it doesn't necessarily lend itself to, kind of modern times. And I think soccer is, people have said it for a long time, but I do think it's the sport of the future. Yeah, I hope to do more baseball though. I really do, because I think that there's a need to inject entertainment into it. I think some of the entertainment value has been lost. I think some of that's analytics. I think some of it's metrics.
Mm.
I think some of it is just sort of taking that to the logical extreme. I think now we're looking at, as Rob Manfred has said, we're looking at baseball becoming probably the ultimate gambling league, which is just, to me, that's almost sort of that natural progression of spreadsheets and metrics and always trying to sort of predict everything. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. It's complicated. I think there's some, larger societal impacts even, but I just think for me, it's just, yeah, the entertainment value has decreased. And I hope that, one day to get that opportunity to do it regularly at the major league level and maybe inject some of that into it. I think it would be something that would be embraced.
Mm.
Ultimately, I always say that, and this is a true fact, is I was probably from about 2015 to about 2021. I think I was probably rejected by about 75% of the minor league baseball teams, affiliated minor league baseball teams. Now, there's another world of independent professional baseball that I worked in for most of that time. But yeah, I just don't know. I don't know that sort of trying to stand out is always necessarily the way that it goes. But I said if I can go and get with a team that has a really good video stream, is a good franchise, I think it'll end up being probably the most popular broadcast of minor league baseball. And actually, that's exactly what happened in 2022. I got hired by the Fredericksburg Nationals, a guy named Nick Hall, who was the general manager of the Nationals, Fredericksburg Nationals at the time. He kind of messaged me on Facebook out of the blue, asked me if I wanted to do it. I played hard to get for about 30 seconds and then agreed to everything. And, we went out there and I think we generated more views than any minor league baseball team in history. We had all this stuff and,
Mm.
viral videos and I was able to kind of accomplish some of my goals and get a chance to do a tournament with ESPN and get a chance to be on MLB Network. And now Nick actually is vice president of hospitality with City. So we actually ended up starting at City, funny enough, within probably about 4 or 5 weeks of each other. He had some connections to the St. Louis area as well. And I just was appreciative of that. I always felt like it would work, and that fans would really respond to it. And I say the same thing at the major league level. I think it would become, something that would stand out so much. I think in the soccer world, I think it does stand out. But I just think because the world of soccer announcing and soccer in general is just, it's so broad and it just encompasses so many countries and so many people and so many leagues that, people have a little bit more of an expansive mindset about what it is or what it's supposed to be. And
Mm.
and that's why I think I've said it many times prior to this and, written tweets about it, I guess, if that means anything. But I do think that, American baseball announcing has probably fallen behind the rest of the world. I just think when you look at
Mm.
South America, you look at Japan, whether or not you even understand the language, when you listen to the games, the passion that's in it is really, it's a cut above. I think now baseball announcing is more about kind of looping in analytics, looping in even gambling stuff, pleasing a lot of different things. And I just think it's a corporate ethos. I just think there's been a kind of a corporate ethos that's taken hold for sure in sports announcing. And I don't know. Maybe it's just because I watched Megalopolis today and I'm thinking philosophically about society. But I think that there's something to it that I don't know. I don't miss that aspect of it all that badly, to be honest with you. I just think, I did it for 8 years and had some different goals with it, and I'd like to do it to reconnect with the game, but I'm a little bit wary, I think, about reconnecting with the business on the baseball side.
Sure. I think that totally makes sense and would 100% agree with your sentiment that even if you don't understand the language, even if you don't understand the sport, for example, soccer, if you see a clip of a South American or a European announcer going crazy, you feel that passion. It's communicated to you whether or not you understand the medium of what's in front of you. And sort of in that same philosophical aspect that you bring to commentating, Joey, you've described yourself as the millennial announcer that reflects the optimism, anxiety, and randomness of your generation. You have calls like either that horse meat I ate last night was tainted or I'm seeing double. And I think that is a great example of what puts that on display. Do catchphrases come like that just sporadically, like in the spontaneously in the moment? Do you write a formula for them per se, or do they come
Yeah,
as you would
there's
say
definitely a
maybe?
formula. I won't say, sort of writing it out. That's not always necessarily the formula, but yeah, there's kind of a formula to it. Um, and I don't know, formula, and then he's tried to do something different for a while, but for me, it's really, I read extensively. I try to spend time reading. It's not always easy. Again, it probably goes back to attention spans in society and things like that, but yeah, I just think you have to put a lot into the bowl. You have to put a lot of, salad leaves, tomatoes, broccoli, olives, sunflower seeds, ranch dressing to make a good salad. In my opinion, I love making a good salad at a buffet. And I just think when you do that, it's funny what can come out. And I just think that part of, I guess, for me, it has to reflect, the world we live in, which is just that it's just an overwhelming amount of information where I can go on my browser right now and, here's one headline about a devastating war, and here's a meaningless celebrity headline, and here's a headline about my astrological sign, and here's a headline about why everything I'm eating is terrible. And, it's this overwhelming amount of information that I think is, it's a challenge for society. It really is. And I just think that with sports announcing in some regard, um, I think one trap that people maybe fall into, and I know I fall into this as well, is you want so badly for everyone to feel comfortable and you want so badly to get everything right that you make people feel uncomfortable. And I think that sometimes some of uh the catchphrases and stuff, they reflect people's anxieties back, and so they present them with feeling a little bit uneasy at times, and then as a result they feel more lighthearted, I think, just because it's just unexpected. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have sort of one exact way of doing it, but yeah, there's something, I think it was Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick, and when they were kind of at their height in the 90s, there's a book called Those Guys Have All the Fun About ESPN. This is where I'm getting it from. And they said that we went out to a Mexican restaurant. Keith said, I could take anything and turn it into the next catchphrase because it's not what you say, it's really how you say it. And Dan said, there's a bowl of salsa on the table right now. Why don't you say salsa? And he started doing that on SportsCenter. I remember as a kid, it's like mid 90s, I was like, oh, salsa, salsa, and it just became the next thing. I mean, it just seemed like he was really into it. I don't even know if I knew what salsa was at the time. And I think there is a lot to that. If you have the perfect line, if you don't do it, in a way that's authentic, then it might not, it won't become what you want it to be. But if you have something to say and you just say it with all your heart, then usually it'll come out right.
Mm. That's a great quote.
I would have to say most of your
Ah.
calls, like your one-liners feel so like organic and like pulled out of the blue. That's why they are so cool.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I do. I don't know that I have a favorite one, but I do know the video. I've, gone back and watched the video, and I remember sitting up in the middle of the night and harvesting all those, calls for that weekend. And yeah, I mean, it was a special time. There's another one that I always go back to. I think it was Leonard Cohen, and he said, "Poetry is the ash of life. If you're living well, then it just falls off." And I think that's 100% true as well. As I just think that's something I like a lot about sports announcing is you can kind of track your own mental well-being and your own spiritual well-being and just kind of see back where was I at this point in my journey in this point in my life.
I quote you a lot during the games, especially the away games, because we don't get them through Apple in order to
I
listen to the
know.
Y98 broadcast. But whenever City takes the lead, I definitely use your catchphrase in
Can
my
you do it?
house. I'll give it a shot.
Sorry to put you on
If
the
you
spot
cringe
on your
easy,
own
close
show,
your
I'm
ears.
Jake. I'm
gonna I'm gonna
sorry.
turn my volume down a little bit. You're
I'll
good.
turn mine up.
It goes
Let's get it.
something like City lead.
Yes, that was awesome.
That
Yeah.
was really good.
I say it a lot, so I should be able to nail it at this point.
I mean, hey, if the mood is right, if the timing's right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we give up a lot of leads after you say that.
Ah,
Yeah, we've had some trouble with that this year. At times, I'm barely done with the city leads, and the city does
Yep.
not lead. But on the flip side of that, we do have a tendency to score pretty early.
mhm.
Last night was almost kind of an outlier for us, where we
Yeah.
took about 35 minutes to score. But it seems like Toysher and these guys are getting in there. And of course, I do love saying it. I can
Yeah.
admit that. And sometimes if we go down 1-0 or 2-0, then in the back of the mind, I'm like, all right, am I going to get a city leads here tonight? So they're at least getting me that chance, and I owe them dearly for that.
Yeah, I will like it definitely excites me when you say it because then in the back of my brain, I'm like, all right, we can win this game, which has been something that has been rare for us this season. Um, But then towards the end of the game, like last night, we're up 2-1 before the 75th minute. And in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, we're conceding a lot of chances at this point. They're going to draw level. We're going to tie for the umpteenth time this season. And then Edu nets that goal. And you can't say it twice. You only have the lead and then grow on the lead.
City extends. The
Yeah, I guess so. Or like
Yeah.
you guys last night, just go absolutely nuts in the booth, which is exactly what I was doing last night.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's
Nice.
some about it. Getting your own emotions out is a huge part of it for sure. And yeah, I'm just as broadcasters, it's always interesting because you have nothing to do with what's on the field, but you always feel like you're observing, pretty close. And so you get pretty close, emotionally to it. And it can be tough. I mean, it can be tough if the team loses a few games. And as you're hinting at, it can be tough as well if there's no result. I mean, and by that, I mean basically tie, draw. And I think if you include Leagues Cup, I think we've drawn 14 times. And just, yeah, as American sports fans, we're not conditioned for that. We're not really kind of built for that. We want to see somebody win and lose. And, to some extent, unfortunately, it kind of just averaged out from last season. I think we only tied like twice going into the last month of the season. There were a few right at the end, but just seeing the results and seeing the way that they're doing it, that is something that's really cool when you see a group coming together and improving and stuff like that. Just as a person, again, I'm not involved in any way, shape, or form with kind of the development or anything of it, but just being adjacent to that and seeing it is really it's really inspiring for your own life.
Well, you've called, what are we at, 16 games at home this season? Or is it 15? I think we're
Yeah, I
at
think it's
15 or
I
16
think it's 16 league games, yeah, and probably 3 or 4
of
cup
the Leagues
games.
Cup. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with being able to watch the team, all season at home, and then I'm just assuming you watch them when they're on the road too, you can nod or not if you want to, but in seeing where we are now and with the winter transfer window coming up, or yeah, winter transfer window coming up, how would you where would you add to this team and where would you subtract in order for us to be extremely successful next year?
Yeah, one of the things I am really proud of is doing I think we're at 76 total games if you count everything. You count all the cups and you count all MLS and regular season and everything, home and road, and being with all the guys, every step and seeing everything. And I've said before, I really think this is group that we have right now, which is still growing. I think it's the most talent that we've ever had on a team. And Berkey was talking a little bit about that, and he said, we're getting better at playing with the ball and not just trying to clear everything away, but we're kind of holding a little bit more and making teams, chase after us when we have leads and frustrating them by keeping the ball. And I just think with Marcel and with Cedric, boy, they've been really good. And Simon's been really good to come out and do what he's done. And I think Giannis Horn, I think he's going to become a name here that people are more familiar with over the next few weeks and into next season. I think he's a talented guy as well. Yeah, so I like the group a lot that we have. I don't know how many exactly, but I think it's 4 free agents. And so that's good. I think you're set up already to have the core group come back. Lutz is a very fastidious guy. He's very detail oriented. He looks into so many different leagues and so many different teams. I think there's always an eye out for new players. So I'm just because of that, always kind of expecting someone else to come in. And I know he's looking to improve. I think just I don't really go down into kind of individual players or positions too much. I'll just say, I really hope that they'll re-sign Durkin. He's one of the free agents. I think he's done a good job. I think that what they have in the holding midfield is really unique. I think Chris is, he's tough as nails. He's somebody that's not afraid to get into somebody's face. And interestingly enough, they pair him with the guy who honestly is probably the best offensive player on the team, but he has kind of a unique way of doing it because he likes to operate from deep in the field and
He
send
plays
guys
quarterback.
downfield. Yeah, he's basically the
Puppeteer.
quarterback.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think somebody like Durkin is good to have with him, and I think sometimes that means Durkin's gotta, get into some spaces and go across the field or go into some different places that maybe some people that are playing that role don't always have to do. So I like that a lot. I'm sure there'll be some more changes, and the team will look a little bit different going into next year, but. Yeah, I just think getting a few results early and just getting a few wins and, being in the thick of it, I really expect the team's going to be competing, to be in the top half of the Western Conference during the regular season next year. And as we know, I mean, finishing first or finishing fourth, we just got to get into the playoffs. And I just think we'd give a lot of teams problems. I really think that if we were in the playoffs, and unfortunately we're just getting mathematically eliminated this weekend. But if we had been able to pull off, say the win in LA against the Galaxy in March, we were up 3-2 in stoppage time, and in Miami being up 5 minutes left against Messi and them, and Portland when Evander hit that free kick when we were up 4-3 in the last minute or 2 minutes. If we just hung on to those and got into the playoffs, I think we would give some teams some problems. I think we would just be kind of a thorn in the side. We've seen it beating the LA Galaxy on the first of this month. They're going to win the Western Conference. We gave LAFC a really good game in May. So we're really close. A little more composure, a little more maturity, a little more confidence down the stretch. Again, I think the current group that we have has done just a fantastic job. I know people look back on the season and say, oh, the record was this and that, and there weren't a ton of wins. But when you just look at what the group's done over the last 10 games, that's a big, big boost. And I think it'll just help them grow that confidence, that little bit of confidence they need to perform just a little bit better after goals around, breaks, around restarts, halftime, and the end of games. And I think once they do that, I think we'll really start rolling.
Deal. While we're on the topic of kind of on the topic of Lutz, Fanich Steel, he does do a little commentating for the Bundesliga.
Uh,
So I was wondering if you've gotten to like swap notes with him about kind of doing the broadcasting and being on call.
yeah, I've had many conversations with Lutz. Lutz is he's a luminescent conversationalist. He will talk basically about any subject. We've talked extensively about juggling. That's one of my hobbies. We've talked about his book, which is really cool, The
Mhm.
Unstoppable Keeper. And he's been on the broadcast many times. He's probably been on the broadcast about half dozen times. We kept scoring a goal. He would come on at halftime and stay into the second half, and we kept scoring goals. This is during the Leagues Cup. I know we had one against Juarez. We had one against, I think, Dallas. We had one against Portland. And it was just funny every time he come on the broadcast. So, of course, he kept coming back and, having some fun with it. And yeah, it's cool. It's really interesting stuff. And it's inspiring stuff as well. I mean, Lutz has had a pretty wild life, more so than even just being, an executive with a sports team or a former goalie. He's played all over the world. He's lived a lot of lives in a lot of places, and it's pretty cool to be able to pick his brain. So I'm hoping to, expand on that and one day, really get into what's sort of his philosophy on broadcasting. But him and Derek Ray are pretty good
Yeah,
friends,
so cool.
and yeah, it is. It is cool. I mean, to have that kind of connection. And I just appreciate it. I was talking to somebody from another team. I don't want to say which team it was because I don't want to, have this get taken in the wrong way or whatever. But I just said, "Oh yeah, our sporting director is coming up on the broadcast," and he was like, "Oh yeah, is he just doing like a halftime interview?" And I was like, "No, he's really coming up for an indeterminate amount of time, and we'll, talk about a million random subjects and throw off one-liners and all this stuff for." Whatever, however long it takes for us to score a goal, really. And he just kind of like shook his head and he was like, "Oh, I could never imagine our sporting director for this team, this unidentified team." He was like, "That's the complete polar opposite
Mhm.
of what this guy would do." And I kind of was just like laughing. I was like, "You know what? That's one of the cool things. Everybody's very accessible, be able to go up and really have friendships with these people who are high ranking folks and have done a lot more in soccer than I ever have." I mean, it's cool. It's just one of those elements of the club that I do think differentiates it even from, some of the other clubs that do a fantastic job in the MLS. I think we actually have even more of a community feel, and that's something that's really, really makes me proud to be part of.
Oh
Quick
yeah.
anecdote on Lutz before we get the next question rolling. I was living in St. Louis the year before our inaugural season, and it was in the middle of the workday. I was driving for this company. I was delivering food. I'm not going to shout them out. And I was in Clayton, and I was looking at my phone for the next delivery, and I picked my head up, and Lutz was just walking across the street. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Lutz. So I rolled down my window and I yelled, and he turned, and there he was. It was him. And he just gave me a wave and went about his business. And I was like, I don't think I've ever seen another sporting director out and about ever.
Yeah.
And he was just a guy being a dude in Clayton, taking care of whatever business he had to take care of. I was like, yeah, that's my sporting director. That's sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is. It is cool how they've all integrated themselves into the community and just the way the communities embrace them. I think Cello was saying, there's better parks and playgrounds here in St. Louis than there are in Germany, and talking about how
Wow.
much he enjoyed his family being here and how much they've enjoyed it. So it's really cool, even for guys who have traveled so much and seen so many different places. It really stands out to them.
That is insane. Lutz is such a worldly person, and these are some of the most well-traveled people that we'll ever meet, just based on their career paths. Joey, I have a question again on kind of the commentating side of things, because St. Louis has a pretty historic lineage of commentators, including Bob Costas, Jack Buck, maybe Joe Buck, depending on how you feel about him. What is your analysis on how commentators like them connect with the audience? And what do you do to try and build that connection?
Yeah, I've talked to him. I've talked to some of those people. I've talked to Bob, a few times, and the Cardinal guys. I think Ricky Horton was on the broadcast last year at one point on a halftime show. Good guy.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I've just always tried to take those opportunities to to connect with people. But yeah, there's something special about it. There's something special about St. Louis. For me, it was Ken Wilson, who was the blues announcer when I was a kid. Really made me want to do this, and just to have that opportunity to basically, be on the radio and be on Apple TV and excite people the way that he did for about 20 years in this area. He did Cardinals and he did blues. He was probably more famous for the hockey stuff, and yeah, I mean, it just, I don't know why. Maybe it's something in the water, but I just remember being, probably about 5, 6 years old and just listening to Ken Wilson and having the hair stand up on the back of your neck. And yeah, I mean, it's a big tradition. It is. I think maybe there's to be quite honest with you, I think maybe there's some drawbacks to doing it in a town that has just such an investment in sports announcing as well. And I mean, it's overwhelmingly positive. I think, the drawback that you can fall back into is nostalgia. I think nostalgia is a great thing. But, nostalgia originally came from a Greek word that means pain from an old wound. And I think sometimes,
Interesting.
when you grow up and you just want to be your idols, I think sometimes you can kind of miss what's in front of you. And that's something I try to keep in mind as well is, the people who do this are human beings, myself included. And it's something I'm big on positive thinking. I often will wake up the day of the game to some notes from myself where I go around the night before with some sticky notes and I'll write, you're going to have a great broadcast. You're going to have fun. This is our night, that kind of thing. And I'll walk around and kind of get the notes or say them to myself. But there's another thing that I say to myself, which is something I think is equally important, which is I'm an imperfect person, and you have to be able to embrace that in order to do the best broadcast you can. Because I just think that people who get involved with it, myself included, you know, there's yeah, you have to have a bit of a, I think, an obsessive compulsive nature, to be quite honest with you, to do it. And that's something that's, just from a mental health standpoint, I've dealt with my whole life, some OCD stuff. And, you have to be able to accept certain things and not catastrophize, not blow things out of proportion if things go wrong and things of that nature. And so, yeah, that idea of self-acceptance and that idea of, understanding that you're an imperfect human being doing it, but you can kind of put yourself in that positive mindset at the same time. That's really the balancing act, and that's really the fun of it. And I'm grateful for it, man. I'm grateful for the opportunities to pick everybody's brain that I've come across. And I think I've done, different, just some opportunities that I've gotten that I could have maybe turned down to talk to somebody, where I could have not been proactive reaching out to somebody. I think for the most part in my career, I've reached out. And sometimes you walk away from conversations and say, you know what, I agree with everything that got said. Sometimes you walk away and say, you know what, there were some things that that's not my experience. I disagree with that. But just a feeling of gratitude and thankfulness to have had those conversations, because you can learn something out of all of them. There's always a little grain of truth that helps you along the way. So, people I've talked to, who have had such big connections to St. Louis, Bob, Ricky, Dan McLaughlin, I've had an opportunity to Chip Carey, and I saw Joe actually it was him and Chip. They were doing a kind of like a talk, I guess you would say, at Missouri Athletic Club together. Yeah, I mean, just getting a chance to learn a little bit about how they approach it, it just helps to see, what, everybody's a human being, and that has something. There's always something you can embrace and understand more out of. So I'm glad that I've been able to kind of be embraced by those people. I guess to some extent, I'm not really close friends with any of them, but just them taking the time has really, it's really meant a lot to me.
Well, I have one more question for you. I don't know how many they've got left, but this is one that
You're
I
good.
typed up during the research on you that I was really excited to ask you. You've got a lot of experience in a lot of different sports, but the ultimate height of sports broadcasting is commentating one of these next couple of games that I'm going to list off. And the question is, which one would you most want to commentate? The Super Bowl, Stanley Cup Final Game 7, World Series Game 7, World Cup Final, or any other games that you would rather do?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's quite a list. I'll take all of them.
You can only
Hopefully.
choose
Yeah.
one. Only choose one. Gun
Yeah.
to your
Wow.
head, Joey. You got to choose one.
Sure. Wow. I'd say the World Cup final off of that list. One of my goals, sort of long term, is I'd like to commentate the Scudetto in Italy and do
Ooh.
some version of, maybe it's one game or maybe it's a few games here or there of the Serie A stuff and things like that. That's been a long time goal. I think, it's interesting for me, and it goes back to being able to kind of see by tracking your career kind of where you're at. Because 5 years ago, I would have definitely said Game 7 World Series, I have to do it. That's pretty much locked in. But I've gotten so absorbed into this fun world of soccer, and I've had a chance to see how much it means just to so many people. And there's 10 times as many people that watch the World Cup versus the Super Bowl. Not to say that's, the begin all end all is how many people are watching or whatever, but you see the passion that it ignites in all of these different countries, all of these different backgrounds, the way that it brings people together. I think that's a huge thing. Um, for anybody to have maybe an opportunity to do it. I've always said the mark for me, and I bet you there'd be dozens and dozens and dozens of broadcasters that would disagree with this, but I've always said probably the mark of a great broadcaster for me is, can you make a little league game sound like Game 7 of the World Series? Can you make a youth soccer game sound like the final of the World Cup? And one of the things they teach you, or you can kind of read about, I never went to journalism school, which was kind of an advantage, kind of a disadvantage. I think long term, probably more of an advantage, but you can read about sort of how you're supposed to do sports honesty and stuff. And one of the things they basically tell you is basically stay calm and pretty much say what everybody's thinking. And I've kind of gone the opposite way, which is I rarely stay calm and I usually say what pretty much nobody's thinking. And so I mean I've been doing a different thing. But as much as this is I've always said, if I end up disappearing for some reason and nobody ever hears from me, is I've always wanted to move to a foreign country and actually learn another language and just completely start over. And I'm talking
Mm.
about doing like rec league or, like little league games or something like that, in this new country, whatever country it is. And just having the thrill of like learning all the words and learning all of the little intricacies of doing it. That would be a big thing for me. And I just think I look at my own like mental health, my own professional acumen, and all this stuff where I actually go back into the games where it was more or less under the radar. I'll throw in a handful of games and I don't really tell people I even do it. I did the D3, I think it was the regional men's soccer at the University of Chicago last year. And I just remember it was like, it was Chicago and there was a couple other teams, and University of Chicago is kind of a big powerhouse there. But yeah,
Mhm.
I didn't even really put anything out on social media. I just, took a train up to Chicago, did the games, had an absolute blast. And I kind of felt like, it was a good, as I was writing back, I remember I just kind of felt like, it is good because I put as much passion into that as I did into the city stuff. And if you can bring yourself to do that, then I just think that's a mark that just shows you really care about what you do. And I just think, yeah, it's hard sometimes. It's hard if you have one opportunity that's considered big, and then maybe you go and it's an opportunity that's not as, prominent or important, quote unquote. It can be easy to just kind of fall off and just kind of go through the motions and just kind of cash it in. And yeah, that's important to me. So yeah, as much as I like talking about and thinking about the biggest events ever, and would like a chance to do them, I think about the little events as well, and how that can teach you and make you grow.
That is such a profound answer to me, Joey. And an example of that that comes to mind to me is you being the football commentator in Coahoma, and then Last Chance U rolls through. What are
Yeah,
the odds
yeah.
of that?
Yeah, season 2, episode 6, The Curse.
The curse.
I've never watched the entire episode. I've watched probably 70% of the episode, but I lived it for 3 years. I worked there for 3 years, Northwest Mississippi, about 20 miles, probably from the Arkansas border, and about an hour south of Memphis. And Coahoma Community College, founded in 1949, and HBCU. It was really my first stop professionally. I had done some summer baseball stuff, but I worked there for 3 years, and I think the first year I was there, I think we had 10 wins and 118 losses, and I think we broadcasted probably about 100 of those 128 games. And Clarksdale is one of the most beautiful places. It's one of the most complex places, and also at the same time, it's really not all that complex. It's a very straightforward place. It's a very tiny town, relative to Lula, Mississippi, and Crocodile, Mississippi, and Moorhead, Mississippi. It's really the big city. I mean, it's a huge city compared to those. But yeah, I mean, growing up in St. Louis, going to college in Kansas City, I had never really had the experience of, living in a rural area and living in a very small town, especially one that has a unique history like Clarksdale. It's the world capital of blues music. And when you look at folks like uh, Sam Cooke, you look at Ike Turner is from Clarksdale, Robert Johnson very famously passed away in Clarksdale, and then all the people that came in the generations afterward. There's a very popular blues artist who's probably still only about 20, 21 years old, 22 years old, named Kingfish. I remember watching him at the biggest blues club in Clarksdale, owned by Morgan Freeman, Ground Zero Blues Club. And he was sitting on the steps out front during the Juke Joint Festival, which is, huge every spring. And he was playing the guitar, and it just was, I mean, it's unreal. It really was. And I think back on Clarksdale all the time. I think back on it, multiple times a week, and the experiences. And I would also say there's a little bit of an alternate sort of reality to the place down there. There's a couple of things that I can't really explain, kind of how they happened or how things worked out the way that they did. But there's a quality that's explored greatly, and more expertly than I could probably ever explore it, as far as blues music and things like that. And I just felt like being down there and really being, I don't want to say anonymous, because I think, at that level, I mean, you're always virtually anonymous, but being specifically at that school, which of the 15 junior colleges in Mississippi is the smallest and is often disregarded, by the other schools. Yeah, it gave me an opportunity to cut loose, and it gave me an opportunity to explore language, because the language that I encountered down there was, it was way, way more creative than anything I had just in my saddlebag at that time. And I just think there was a way of adjusting, a lot around language and around expectations about the world, and just sort of world view. Yeah, it was a special place, and it was a place that I was really glad I started my career at. And even to this day, I still have probably somewhere, resume, and I send some things out or whatever. And I still get people saying, "Oh, what's Kahoma Community College and what was that about?" But I'm glad I did not. Now it's a little bit different. I was 23 to about 26 when I was down there. So when I say, "Oh, I'm glad I didn't, cut my teeth doing it at Syracuse, Northwestern, all these other places," a lot of times those kids are like, they're 18, 19-year-old kids. they get a chance to call some Syracuse games, they get some chance to call some Arizona State games or whatever it is. But my first like college sports experience was so much different. If you haven't watched the episode, you can go in and watch it on Netflix of Last Chance U. But having that, it just gave me the opportunity to start from a more unique position than so many people. And I think it was one of those things, like I said, it's kind of a disadvantage for a while, but I think over the long term, it's proved to be an advantage because I just think it's made it more interesting.
Definitely. Definitely. I did have a little bit of a follow-up question from your last question from Jacob. You mentioned wanting to eventually move on to Serie A in Italy. Do you have a favorite team in the Serie A at the moment, or
Well, I'd like to do something, I've always said I don't ever see really moving on from City. I'd like to be here for the next 40 or 50 years, God
oh,
willing.
We would love that
But
too.
you would love that?
yeah, I mean, hey, it really is a destination for me. It's a home destination, and that's really what makes it feel so good. But I mean, with remote broadcasting and with just national stuff
Oh
and
yeah,
people
be anywhere.
doing random games and sprinkling in games, I mean, that's really something I'd like to explore. I don't really follow any one team just for the sake of them being that team.
Mm,
I just kind of follow players and some storylines and things like that more than anything. So when Gioacchini was over with Como,
Mhm.
the start of the season, obviously he's with Cincinnati now, but that got me. I was like, oh, wait a second. It says Fabregas is the
oh yeah.
owner over there and all this
Yeah.
stuff. And it just kind of setting on that. My grandfather was basically from Greater Milan. He was born on the border of Italy and Switzerland back in the 1880s.
Interesting.
And so I always kind of had, just I don't even know because I'm sure you go over there and they would say you have to choose one, AC or Inter, and I don't know that I've ever like decided on a loyalty, for that. But just those two teams have always held so much romance and mystery for me. And so, yeah, I mean, to be involved with anything with that would really be kind of a full circle thing for me. Because I don't think my great grandfather ever went back. I don't think he ever went back to Italy. My grandfather didn't. I think my dad very briefly visited there, but there's a lot of people named Zanaboni in Italy. It's like 1,000 people, I think. Um, chances are if they're named Zanaboni over here, I probably know them because they're probably my family. But just having that opportunity would be, yeah, something that I've had a few dreams about.
Definitely, definitely.
So Joey, this is my last question because I myself am a commentator at the Division 3 level. So hearing you talk about how you commentated the regional tournament for Division 3, it is really inspiring. I feel like I'm looking at someone who can tell me a lot about the steps that they took on that path. But if you could put it into like a piece of advice, if there's any other commentators out there listening tonight, just what what would you what was your path to being the radio voice of St. Louis City? This is, I would consider, a dream job. What's a piece of advice you would give to other commentators out there?
Yeah, don't give up. Just keep going. Just keep showing up at the games because the level of the game, even the quality to some extent, I think, of the stream, or the quality of, the players, the quality of the game, that really doesn't matter. If you're there, then it's the biggest thing. And that's
Mm.
always a mentality that I've taken. This is what's most important. A lot of when I was in baseball, minor league baseball, a lot of my Major League Baseball knowledge really fell off because you get so involved with the team that you're in. And, it's a little bit different when you're watching, sort of be like, oh, I'm just watching strangers on TV play the same game at the major league level. So just, embrace that, embrace being absorbed with the people who are around you, embrace the bus rides, embrace the fun. You got to battle a little bit to keep the opportunity uh, going. And it's just, there's nothing you can do about it. I was with 7 professional baseball teams, and I think 5 of them folded within 1 year of me leaving. I think 3 of them folded like literally on my last day. And then I kind of read the writing on the wall with the other two. I was like, and one of them actually was the Johnson City Cardinals, which was a great opportunity that I had in 2019. It was the Appalachian League. It was the last year they were affiliated with the Cardinals. We had a fantastic season. I think the broadcast went well. The team won the championship. And then, the pandemic came in 2020 and actually wiped out the whole league. It's partially because they couldn't play that one year, and it was partially just restructuring around the minor leagues. And so, yeah, stuff happens. Stuff does happen. You have some good ones, you have some bad ones, you have some good interviews, you have some bad interviews. You probably make the right choice most of the time. And, sometimes you make the wrong choice and, you kind of look back and say, yeah, maybe I should have gone back with that opportunity a little bit. But, I'm on the Shakespeare, Antony and Cleopatra. I always think about this quote, and it's, "We ignorant of ourselves beg often our own harms, which the wise powers deny us for our good. So find we profit by losing of our prayers." And it just basically means you never know what worse thing could have happened if you had gotten what you wanted. And I remember at one point, probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I was kind of in the running for this AA job with a team that no longer exists. And, I was down to, they said it was me and another guy. And, you wake up and you get the email and they say, oh, we went with the other guy. And there's disappointment, there's anger, and there's frustration and all this stuff. And I remember what happened with that team was that was right before the 2020 season. So they didn't play the next year, and then they ended up basically folding, but they rented the stadium out actually to an independent team that was in the same league I ended up working in. And this team was based in Canada, but they had to play in the United States because of all the whatever that was, the border, and you can't cross the border during COVID with Canada and all this stuff. And so I ended up going to the stadium, and I just remember I just was kind of like, you know what? I don't think this would have worked out. It would have been cool to say I'm a AA baseball broadcaster, but yeah, it's not a great stadium. It doesn't seem like it's a great setup in many regards. It kind of seems like a place that's on its last leg. I wish him the absolute best, but obviously it didn't really work out down here, and it wouldn't have worked out for myself had I gotten the job and accepted the job. And you just realize that by losing out on those opportunities, you're actually staying open for other opportunities. And I just think you got to have that mentality of kind of like, hey, I'm just going to go in, I'm just going to rip it and do the best that I can. And I think getting that opportunity a couple years later in affiliated ball, a single A team that was a much better setup and was a much better, opportunity. I just said, I'm just going to go in and just rip it and see what happens. And I just think I was able to stir up probably just enough kind of just coverage or just interest, I guess, to kind of catch City's eye. And, it's kind of a weird transition, honestly, going from baseball to soccer. I was doing the ambush in St. Louis as well. So it wasn't like a huge bridge to cross, but, what I kind of consider my secondary sport became my primary sport. And I just kind of said, you got to see what happens. You got to let it rip on this as well and just hope everything works out. And so just don't give up. Don't stop doing it. You can always find another game, and you have to hunt those opportunities, take every opportunity, just keep doing it. And I would say don't worry as much about, just don't even worry about the level, or don't even worry about, how other people perceive the job or how people think about you, because it just doesn't matter. What matters is just how you feel about what you do. And it's not easy to hang on to that, but if you can live your life the way you want to, then it makes it a lot easier to do the broadcast the way that you want to. So be yourself, and be independent, be someone that thinks outside the box. And I think eventually that will pay bigger dividends. Don't worry about the rat race. And if you can stay in it, I know I'm rambling here a little bit, but I just think I just knew so many people in independent baseball, and like you go along and they're really, really good at what they do. It's hard. It's kind of a hard industry because there's so much competition for the jobs, and the roles are not always all that well paid or well rewarded. But if you can stay around until like your late 20s, early 30s, yeah, I think that's when some of those bigger opportunities might start to present themselves. It's just kind of gutting it out for 5, 6 years until the higher ups and the executives start to kind of really take you seriously. And if you're a 21, 22-year-old kid and you're just starting it out, you might be the best 21-year-old broadcaster in the world, but it's hard for those higher ups maybe to take it as seriously. So you just had to battle through it. It's not fair. It's not right. I wish the world was a different kind of thing, right? But you just have to keep battling through it. And if you stick around, usually I think it turns out pretty well. I've had so many friends who I'm really happy for to get some opportunities just in the last couple of years. Some kind of my generation or my crop of people I think are starting to kind of get rewarded a little bit. But the real reward is really just being able to do it regardless of the game or the level. And I just hope people stick with it.
It's amazing. I'm gonna take that for life, nonetheless. Commentary.
Uh,
Yeah. Thank you, Joey.
yeah. I mean, it's not an easy thing. It's an unorthodox path to go down. There's so many people that want to do it. People say, "Hey, it's really fun." And it is. It's everything you think it is. It's hard to make a living, and it's just when you're getting closer to 30 or whatever it is, whatever the number becomes, you have to withstand a little bit of societal pressure, because I just think that there's that wanting to keep up with the Joneses, and oh, I want that sort of reward, and I want that, make that amount of money or have that kind of job title or something like that. And it's just antithetical. It's antithetical to success, but it's really just antithetical to the whole concept. You get a chance when you're a sports broadcaster to live your life uh, in an artistic way, and that's rare. That's something that's almost never the case in the professional world. You're there to create a certain kind of art. It's kind of a mainstream type of art. It has to be accessible to a lot of people, but you really are the person that's putting the words on the images. And that's a big responsibility, and it's a great opportunity to find fulfillment and meaning in life. And if people are trying to get out of that sort of zombified workaday rat race kind of mentality, something like sports broadcasting is huge. It's like doing yoga, where you can go out and you just get emotions out of yourself by doing the game. So, regardless of how you approach it as a career, it's really important, I think, to keep going to kind of balance yourself.
Definitely.
Do you have any other questions, Grayson?
I have one more, one final question. So, yeah, with the growth of social media, we definitely get to see behind the broadcast more and more often. And you've talked about it a little bit earlier this episode, how you prep for games. And I just recently saw on social media, I think it was Martin Tyler's notes from a Premier League match, and it was a maze of tiny, tiny words, and it looked like a crossword puzzle. It was insane to read, really only for his eyes. Definitely a method to the madness there, but I wondered if there's any sort of way that you prep for a game, or if there's any sort of like weird rituals you do before the match.
Yeah, yeah. I was looking at Derek Ray, had something similar. I think he put a picture out, and we were talking about with Lutz, and he has it's like handwritten notes on the notebook paper. And I do something similar. I take a Google Doc and I try to keep it where it's just a front and back of a page, but I have the rosters typed out. One of the things that I do in both soccer and hockey is I actually like the roster in just numerical order, just 0 to 99. Or in the case of like Club America, they went up to like 275 on the back of their jerseys. They had the 3 number jerseys, but I just, you write the basic information about the guys and have the roster there. And then on the back, I try to write just the different factoids and stuff. And then, stuff like fan shout outs and, leave the space for the referees' names and stuff like that. And have the game story, the preview story on there as well. I'm a big paper folder, so that's my problem is that I always print this out and then I'll, right before the game, I'll be like frantically writing like, oh yeah, here's 4 other things that I, want to kind of squeeze on here. And then as soon as the game starts, I get so nervous, I fold the paper in like 8 pieces and I'm squeezing it in my hand. I'm going, oh, wait, hold on, I need that. But yeah, I mean, it's really important. Probably my biggest piece of practical advice that I think I've learned through doing this MLS stuff, and that was not necessarily the case, prior to doing this, is memorize the jersey numbers of the other team. Obviously, when you start working for your own team, memorize those jersey numbers as well. You kind of learn those as you go on. They always wear the same jersey, so that part's easy. But the other team, I go through, I just look at their lineup from the last game. I diagram it out on a Monday morning, try to memorize 5 or 6 of them. I go back the next day on Tuesday, try to write it all out from memory, do the same thing on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's actually, if it's 20 guys over the course of 5, 6 days, it's actually not really that difficult to do it, but it's just because of the speed of the game. It's very, very hard to look at the paper and do it. I mean, and sometimes you can get taken by surprise. Sometimes they add another guy right before the game or something. But, for the most part, if you can memorize, at least a dozen, 15 of them, it'll really, really help. And so that's been more my thing this year is not just going through and getting biographical information, but just sitting down and just memorizing the players and the jersey numbers. I think that's really the biggest thing. But yeah, I've got a million like little rituals and stuff. Not to, go too far down into it, but I'm a big runner, so I always run on the day of the game, and then I take my shoes off and sit in the grass and try to kind of calm down before the game. I juggle as well and try to just get the brain moving in some different ways. But I mean, I've done everything, not shave my beard because the team is, winning, wear a certain shirt. I've pretty much been down all those. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't, but just do whatever you do for you. And I guess another piece of practical advice is make sure you eat before the game, because if you start to get hungry during the game, you can't really eat. And I think that can kind of take away from your energy level a little bit. But eat and, do stuff that's healthy for you, especially on the game day, because you just want to make sure you feel good about you going into the booth. And if you do that, that can really make a pretty good difference, I think, because I think if you're feeling good, you don't beat yourself up as much about the mistakes, and you can also kind of, you know, get to a place of comfort even if things are going great. You can kind of pull yourself back and kind of make sure that you still are engaging with the things you need to engage with, whether that's just kind of delivering basic information or reading sponsors and stuff like that. So it's really important to take care of yourself, and I think that benefits a lot of broadcasters.
Mhm.
My personal
Definitely.
pre-match rituals were left to right socks, and then cleats, and then shin guards. And the night before the game, I'd have a big old bowl of spicy spaghetti, and then I'd be
Hey,
set the next day.
clear you out. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good, man. Seriously, that spicy stuff that's big. Clear out
yeah.
the nostrils.
It lit a fire for sure.
Hey, lit a fire in more ways than one, it sounds like.
Yeah. Um, but sweet. I think that about wraps it up. Thank you for coming on, Joey. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, if you want to plug anything, feel free. We're also going to put it in the description of the episode as well.
Well, hey, listen in. Final home game Saturday, October 5th against Houston, 7:30 first kick. We got the pregame show for you, Y98 Audacy app. And use that home radio feed option on Apple TV. Smash that corner in the right hand.
Definitely.
Smash that icon in the corner of your screen, the right hand corner of your screen. It's a cool feature. I really hope. I mean, if I was the overlord of the MLS, I would immediately make it where you could listen to the away broadcast as well. I
Right?
know I know
Right?
that's like the most common question is when are we going to get that? I pray for it all the time. And yeah, use that though on October 5th. And we appreciate everybody who's listened, myself and Dale and Jen and everybody. And yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. It's just the honor of my life to do it. I can't believe I'm doing it sometimes. So thanks to all you guys, Ethan, Jacob, Grace, and everybody for having me and getting the word out.
Sweet. Well, thank you for coming on. You guys know the drill. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. If you are listening on Spotify, make sure to follow and rate 5 stars. And most importantly, do not forget to tell your mother you love her. Peace. I guess
STL.
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 Let's go.
STL.
Yeah.
STL.
He knows it.